Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video, and welcome back to the Red Team series. I hope everyone had a great Christmas and Happy New Year. But continuing on from where we left off, as I mentioned in that video, or as it was self-evident in that video, we're getting into adversary emulation. And one of the topics that I think is quite important before you actually dive in to adversary emulation is, to have an understanding of APTs, or advanced persistent threats, given that you'll most likely be emulating a specific APT group, when performing adversary emulation. So let's not waste any more time. If you are familiar with APTs, again, this, probably the first few slides will not be that important, but I'll also be sharing some really cool resources. Anyway, what are APTs? Well, APT is an abbreviation for Advanced Persistent Threat, right? Now, what are they? Well, these are highly skilled and well-resourced cyber threat groups. They're usually often state-sponsored or financially motivated, that carry out prolonged targeted attacks. And their goal is typically to achieve strategic objectives like espionage. So that would involve stealing sensitive information like IP or intellectual property, or state secrets, depending on who they're targeting, right? You then have sabotage. So what that entails is disrupting critical systems or infrastructure. You then have financial gain, so stealing funds, payment card data, or monetizing stolen data, stuff like this. And generally speaking, there may be other objectives, but this is typically what you'll see. One thing that I'll probably make clear as we progress is the fact that APTs are not, they're not really in it, in the short term, or the attacks are very well thought out, and that ties into the general duration of the attacks, or the fact that an APT campaign can last for up to a couple of years before they actually exfiltrate whatever they want to exfiltrate, or perform whatever action on the objective that was the actual goal, regardless of what it is. So that brings us to some key characteristics, which I've sort of extolled on already, but it can really be broken down into three main points here, or three primary characteristics, those being the advanced nature. So they employ sophisticated techniques, often leveraging zero-day vulnerabilities and custom-built malware or payloads. That means that they would be developing their own stuff, so resource development, developing their own payload, setting up their own infrastructure. They may have bought 0 days or have developed them, themselves. The second characteristic is persistent, or persistence rather. So, they focus on achieving long-term access to their target, evading detection for extended periods. So that's one of the key characteristics that's sort of built into the actual attack, is the fact that you have to be stealthy in order for you to be persistent, or in order for you to evade detection. So very, very important to understand that, quite a big difference. This is going to be sort of a big differentiating factor from, even traditional red teaming, especially when you're emulating or you've been asked to emulate a specific APT, and they have, let's just say they're quite stealthy. You need to be cognizant of that, or you need to take that into consideration. And then, of course, targeted. So unlike opportunistic attackers, APTs choose specific high-value targets, such as governments, large corporations, or critical infrastructure. And now moving on to some of some additional characteristics here, apart from the ones I just mentioned. And we go back to motivation. So I'm now sort of comparing APT groups to traditional threat actors, or threat actors that really don't fall into the category of what you would call an APT group. And firstly, obviously, it's going to be motivation. So APTs are often driven by geopolitical, strategic, or financial goals. Their attacks are aligned with the interests of nation states or large criminal organizations. When you talk about the traditional threat actors, these are going to be, typically opportunistic. So their focus is on easily exploitable vulnerabilities or very quick financial gain or disruption without a long-term strategy. In terms of sophistication, APTs employ cutting-edge tools, custom malware, and complex attack chains that often involve multiple attack vectors. In the case of traditional threat actors, they'll utilize widely available tools and tactics, very little custom tooling. They'll, rely on what's already built, if that makes sense. And they're often, this is not always the case, but they're often less sophisticated. And then, of course, we have the scope and duration. So with APTs, they conduct prolonged campaigns that can span months or years, which essentially means, careful planning needs to go in, needs to be considered or needs to go into play, which, APTs actually do. And then, of course, when it comes down to traditional threat actors, their focus is on quick hits for immediate gain or disruption. And then, of course, the resource level with APTs, they're, typically backed by nation states or large organizations, which means that they have not just financial and technical resources, but also, human capital. They can hire way more individuals, highly skilled individuals, again, because finance is not really a deterrent or a hindrance. When it comes down to traditional threat actors, they're obviously going to be operating with limited resources. And as I said, they often rely on publicly available tools. So another concept that I want to talk about is APT attribution. So you may be asking yourself, and we went over this when we were talking about the MITRE ATT&CK framework and TTPs, etc. You may be asking yourself, well, how do we know whether an attack or a breach was performed by a specific APT group, right? So that's what you would call APT attribution, where you attribute an APT group, a known APT group, to a specific breach or attack based on analysis of the attack and analysis of the TTPs that were used, to facilitate the attack or throughout the entire attack lifecycle. And then you see whether there's similarities with, the TTPs analyzed or, detected or identified from the actual analysis of the attack or breach. And, you're essentially identifying similarities or, firstly comparing those ones with, the specific TTPs or tradecraft of APT groups that are known to target organizations like the one that, for example, has been attacked or breached. So the key point I wanted to make here is that attributing an attack to an APT group is quite challenging and often controversial. And, attribution typically involves analyzing technical indicators, so malware signatures, command and control infrastructure, so think of domains and stuff like this, and the techniques used. You also have the behavioral patterns, which we actually went over. So TTPs, as identified in frameworks like the MITRE ATT&CK framework, and then of course the geopolitical context. So understanding who benefits from the attack can offer clues about the sponsors. So for example, when there was a cyber attack at the South Korean Winter Olympic Games, just based on the geopolitical context, it was fairly easy to assume who was behind the attack. Most likely it's going to be APT 4041 North Korea, right? Of course, that's never a good thing, or it's not advisable to just use that as your basis for attribution. But the point I'm trying to make is that's what the geopolitical context means, in terms of APT attribution. So that brings us to the types of APT groups. Now, this is very, very important because, if you have varying objectives, you also require subsequent varying categorization. So APT groups are often categorized based on their motivations and or affiliations, and some common categories include the financially motivated APTs. These are typically called fin groups, or whenever you see fin 6, fin 7, that's a financially motivated APT, which is self-explanatory, right? So in this case, I've just given a couple of examples and the focus for the example group that I've highlighted. So fin 6, which we'll actually be taking a look at how to emulate in the next set of videos, both at a basic level, but also at an advanced level. So, fin 6 targets payment payment card data using advanced malware and custom attack tools, and their focus is stealing money or monetizable data. You then have your state-sponsored APTs. These are, what you just call APTs, as it were, but they're also given code names that I'll actually get into. In this case, the code name being Fancy Bear, the suffix there, or bear, being derived from and the animal that is, let's say, where most known to exist in the country. So based on this, you can probably guess this is a Russian-backed group focusing on political and military espionage. The focus is, supporting national interests through cyber espionage, sabotage, and propaganda. You also at certain points you'll see the hacktivist-backed APTs. A very good example of this is Charming Kitten, which is Iranian. So sometimes overlaps hacktivist goals with state-backed campaigns, and the focus is typically, promoting ideological or political agendas. You then have cybercrime syndicates. A good example of this is Wizard Spider. So, they operate ransomware campaigns like Conti while exhibiting APT-like sophistication. And, the focus is blurring, I would say that the primary focus most likely is obviously going to be financial, but the modus operandi is typically blurring lines between financial motives and advanced attack methods. And then of course you also find hybrid APTs. So some groups combine state sponsorship with criminal activities for funding. So think of the North Korean groups, which make them difficult to categorize. And we'll get into a really cool resource that I'll be showing you in a few seconds, and it'll also be linked in the description section. But that brings us to something important, which you've probably already seen, and I want to make it very, very clear right now. So, many cybersecurity companies adopt unique naming conventions for APTs or APT groups, and, these will either follow one convention, so think of the APT prefix, but we also have other conventions that are based on geographic or nation-state association. So one popular approach is using animal names to represent specific countries or regions, and these conventions help analysts, researchers, and organizations easily categorize and track APT activity. So whenever you see a group that has the suffix or the word bear included, most likely it's, not most likely, it is referring to a Russian APT group. So why is this? Well, the bear is a national symbol of Russia, often associated with its strength and influence. And some examples, very good examples, are, Fancy Bear and Cozy Bear, APT 2829, very closely linked but operating in different departments, let's say, of Russian intelligence. So APT 28. Russian military intelligence linked group, and then SVR is APT 29. That's foreign intelligence, or associated with the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, and their primary focus, again based on what is known, is typically espionage, information theft, and influence operations. You then have pandas. So whenever you see an APT group or an APT group with a name that has the word or animal name panda in it, that's going to be China, and that should be easier than bear. The reason for this is, the giant panda is an iconic symbol of China, often used to represent Chinese groups. Examples of these would be APT-1, also known as Common Crew. And that's one thing you'll see. There's not just one name attributed to a group, but typically you'll have the standard APT prefix naming convention, the animal naming convention, the animal geographic naming convention, and a couple of others. But this particular group is linked to China, to the China's People Liberation Army, or PLA. You also have other ones like Elderwood Panda, so associated with the supply chain attacks. Their primary focus has been known to be intellectual property theft, quite famously, obviously, industrial espionage, and targeting global supply chains. You then have kittens, which is Iran. The reason for this is that the reason why kittens are used to represent Iranian threat groups. Again, this is based on what what I know, what I've been able to pull in terms of an explanation. But this is a possibly set to subtly downplay the threat or align with a metaphorical naming convention. Yeah, essentially saying this is a beginner, or this is the noob APT group. By the way, I need to state this. I'm not threatening or downplaying any of these APT groups from any geographic locations. I'm just stating the rationale behind the actual decision to use kittens. Again, no offense. I need to state that I don't want to make any enemies with anyone, but some examples of these are Charming Kitten. These have been linked to Iranian cyber espionage campaigns, and Rocket Kitten, which is focused on political espionage. Their primary focus, again, Iranian groups, their primary focus has been known to be espionage, disinformation, quite famously, and retaliation campaigns. And then you have your Kolimas. So these are North Korean groups. The reason for this is, the Kolima is a mythical horse associated with North Korea, symbolizing speed and progress. Examples are the Lazarus group, which are often called by names like Hidden Cobra or Blue Norov, which, these would essentially fall under the broader Kolima category, and their focus typically, obviously, for North Korea is going to be financial theft, cryptocurrency heists, and various other disruptive attacks, again, like the one on the South Korean Winter Olympics a few years ago. Then you also have a new, I would say, a new category, which deals with the Middle East, North Africa, or APT groups from those regions. I know I haven't mentioned the Israeli group, only one, again, being known quite well. That's Unit 8200. In that particular case, this naming convention will not make much sense. But, when we're dealing with groups from the Middle East or North Africa, you'll typically see falcons. The reason for that is that falcons are a symbol of strength and pride in Middle Eastern culture. Examples are desert. A good example is Desert Falcon. So this is a Middle Eastern APT group that, targets political organizations. And when I say good example, I mean one that demonstrates this naming convention being used. Their focus has been known to be espionage, political disruption, and, of course, regional conflicts. So now that you've sort of gotten an understanding of the naming conventions, at least at a very basic level, but I've sort of highlighted the two primary ones, where you have the APT prefix, or the abbreviation APT as the prefix, and then a number. And of course, the geographic animal-based naming convention. You're probably already arrived at a particular conclusion, and that is that the variation in naming conventions and schemes used by researchers and attribution organizations, or organizations that actually, have been known to perform accurate attribution, like CrowdStrike and Mandiant, can make it very challenging to track or remember, and to, identify threat actors consistently. Additionally, APT groups of, which I've already mentioned, are categorized into their country or state of origin. We have already addressed that. But in order to address the most likely confusion, especially if you're just getting started, I'm going to be showing you a very, very cool spreadsheet that is just called APT Groups and Operations. This specific spreadsheet is an online spreadsheet that you can access with Google Sheets, that was created to provide clarity and streamline the process of identifying and understanding these groups, what their what their MO is, what operations or campaigns or attacks they've been involved in, so on and so forth, as well as, and this is very important, the names that they have been given by different organizations or companies. And this is what the spreadsheet looks like. So you can see it's primarily it's organized based on geographic regions. So you have China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, Israel, NATO, Middle East, others unknown, and we'll go through it shortly. So before we end the video, I'm going to switch over into my browser. And by the way, the link to this spreadsheet will be in the description section, so you can check it out. So just give me a second. I'm going to switch over and we'll go through the spreadsheet. All right, so just on my Kali Linux system here, just going to open up my browser, and here's the spreadsheet. Again, link will be in the description section. So yeah, very, very well developed spreadsheet. I always, come back to it. I'll explain some of the pitfalls with it, but don't worry. They're quite few, but this is a really good starting point if you want to start getting into, analyzing APTs, understanding their tradecraft, the TTPs, etc. So, you can see when you open up the spreadsheet, it'll be taken to the README. Very nice. You have the motive section here. By the way, this is read only for obvious reasons. In this particular case, sort of just highlighted here. What is highlighted is exactly what I mentioned in the slides here. The fact that it can be quite difficult to keep track of all the names, etc., as well as the association to particular geographic locations. And you can go through this. I would also recommend, I'm not recommend, but obviously going to give a shout out to the contributors here, because they've been doing a great job, or they have done a great job. And you can take a look at I think this is active at the moment. Yeah, so that just redirects here. So that's a quick URL. It's apt.threattracking.com. If you want to just go to the spreadsheet directly, just wanted to make sure it was redirecting, because sometimes it doesn't. But right over here, so you can see if I click on China, what you're going to see here firstly is the common name. The common name in this particular case refers to, I'm assuming based on just a percentage, generally speaking, of what a particular group is commonly or colloquially referred to as. But then you also have names given to the group by companies like, CrowdStrike, IRL, Kaspersky, SecureWorks, Mandiant. So Mandiant is actually the company that started using the APT naming convention, or the naming convention where APT is set as the prefix. You then have FireEye, Symantec, iSight, Cisco, Palo Alto Unit. Let me just expand this if I can. Palo Alto here. Sorry, my bad. Used to using a different formatting in Google Sheets. Yeah, so right over here, you have the other names, which can be very helpful, especially when you see, like a group called Crimson Iron. You would want to know what group that's referring to specifically. And in this case, I would say that's APT12. You have a set of columns that represents fairly accurate attribution to specific operations that they've been known to have been involved in. And then you have the tool set or malware that they've been known to use. This is quite common, or it's referring to tools or malware that they have actually seen or attributed fairly often. So, known, or it's essentially telling you what tools or malware that this group frequently or is typically used quite consistently. And then, of course, the modus operandi. And you then have various CTI or cyber threat intelligence links if you want to learn more about them. Yeah, there's quite a bit of them here. So you can see China, you have APT2, 16, and then of course you have the name given by CrowdStrike, who started using the country or geographical location to animal naming convention. So Pata Panda would be APT2, right over here. Anyway, the most successful, or the naming convention that has been adopted, I would say quite successfully, is the one by Mandiant, obviously. And then Russia, right over here, you have the common name, APT28. Let's see, right, yeah, there we are. So we have quite a few. And we have some new ones that don't have that much information. And this also spans all the way into different types of groups. So it's not just APT specific, but really any threat group or threat actor known to operate within a specific geographic region has been cataloged here. Not every one of them, just ones that, have enough info, intelligence behind them to actually justify them being attributed or added here. You then have North Korea, the infamous Lazarus group. Then you have APT37, and you should have right over here. Let's see. We have, yeah, there we are. So might attack, the might attack group ID, the operations they've been involved in, APT 45, you can see here, Silent Colima, so on and so forth. But the key thing is you can see Iran, yeah, you have the kitten naming convention, or you can see that kitten is referenced here quite a bit. Under Israel, you have Unit 8200, which I mentioned. And you have their targets, modus operandi in the infamous Stuxnet attack, legendary, of course. Absolutely legendary. You should analyze that if you haven't already. I think there should be a link here. Let's see. No, that's taking us to archive.org, so it'll probably take a bit of time. Yeah, the Stuxnet was old. This Stuxnet code. Interesting. These are just screenshots, but there we are. You can see it here. And this particular white paper analysis is pretty awesome. How they targeted the Iranian uranium enrichment plants. But there we are. You have NATO, obviously Gossip Girl, their involvement with Stuxnet or that operation at large. Slingshot, Middle East, you now have, it looks like they've started using, hold on, they're not using the Falcon anymore. I need to update my slides there, but I can sort of see, let's see, Golden Rat, there's Bear also as well. So still an upcoming region in that sense. And then you have other threat actors right over here. And then unknown right over here. When you click on download, this allows you to download the spreadsheets in different formats or for different spreadsheet software. And then the naming taxonomies. So you can see FireEye, Mandiant, Trellix use APT. The APT naming convention. CrowdStrike uses animals. Dell SecureWorks uses metals. Dell SecureWorks' old method was TG, being abbreviation for thread group. That would be the prefix. Palo Alto, Unit 42, star constellations. So really, really awesome spreadsheet. And then malware right over here. You have a sort of a very good index of malware or tools and their names, as well as analysis links if you want to learn more about them. And some really interesting comments here, and recommend going through this as well. Clicking on the sources, this is sort of the ultimate APT index or directory, in terms of resources and threat intelligence. And I would recommend taking a look at, I would say, a couple of them, but APT notes is damn useful, I should say. And then this GitHub repo here, which is called the APT Cybercriminal Campaign Collections. Really, really awesome. I'll be going through a couple of these, but this is a very good library right over here of operations by year. There we are. And then right over here, you have the new Microsoft 2023 renaming taxonomy. So you can actually see the changes if you are, using them, if this is important to you, but you have that here. So very, very useful. And yeah, with that being said, that's going to be it for this video, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next video.